What it do, dweebs? It's your boy the Hater once again. The Hater has some bad news. My channel has been temporarily demonetized because of some technical issue involving my AdSense account. You know what I'm saying? But guess what? The Hater is not fazed by any of this. And as I resolve to solve the situation with those dipshits, the Hater will continue to do a video a day. Cuts this. Today's video is going to be about how the WWE needs to revamp their roster. I completely forgot to watch Raw, but I will. I will watch it at some point and do a Raw review tomorrow or something. I just completely forgot, to be honest. You know what I mean? That's how bad this shit is. Maybe if they do the roster revamp like the Hater says, they will be able to fix all this shit. Now, recent events have shown us that people like R-Truth and Carlito have been released, right? One would expect that a lot of people whose contracts are coming up must also necessarily be facing the same circumstances. Now, with that being said, this might be an opportunity to just revamp the roster a little bit, right? Like, when was the last time a person came from NXT and had, I mean, at this point I'm talking about any form of success, right? Like Ilya Dragunov came in and, you know, he didn't do anything basically, right? Then, you know, that those two broads came in, they were drafted, you know, and the draft led to nothing. And Carmelo Hayes has been a complete failure. So there you have it. And also Carmelo Hayes has been there for like over a year now. It's like, it's almost like as if he didn't, you know, debut on the main roster yet. That's how it feels, at least, right? Meanwhile, the WWE has taken another strategy to overinflate the current roster with jobbers, right? So they keep signing these people that skip NXT because they've been in WWE before. You know, like Drew McIntyre, for example, had to go back to NXT because he was a jobber. Like when he left, he was an abject jobber, right? So as a result, when he comes back, he has to be an abject jobber and has to work his way up from NXT, wrestling inferior wrestlers like Andrade and Bobby Fish. You know what I mean? But recently, things have changed, cucks. Recently, we got all these like Andrades of the world coming in directly into SmackDown or directly into Raw. You know, the same thing happened with people like MVP, even though he took a non-wrestling role, right? But nevertheless, we've got people like that just coming in and effectively jumping the line. And now, you know, with all the Samoans that have skipped NXT, it's like, that kind of sucks. You know, if you're an NXT guy, right? If you're Tony D'Angelo or Obafemi, who fucking have been there for an eternity, you know what I mean? Like, these guys, like, they're like NXT vets at this point, you know? And you're like, shit, why can't I, Obafemi, or I, Tony D'Angelo, why can't I get a spot on the main roster? Well, I'll tell you why, motherfucks. Because the main roster keeps being inflated with jobbers, such as, motherfucks, Jacob Fatu, and the most recent addition, JC Mateo. This guy has Bull Dempsey written all over it. This guy is here for a couple of years before he becomes an abject jobber, moves to NXT, then eventually gets released. You know, this Samoan Rhino, or whatever the fuck he is, maybe Hawaiian, just reminds me of Rhino, but with like far less excitement and like physical charisma. But anyways, that's neither here nor there, you know what I mean? The point is, maybe it's time for a roster revamp, you know? You have to understand what's happening here, you know? The Pentagons and the Ray Phoenixes of the world are jumping the line, you know what I mean? And coming directly to the main shows of Raw and SmackDown. Now, with that being said, you know, maybe these guys, maybe there's no time to put them in NXT, but, I mean, if you're gonna put, like, Eric Young, Samoa Joe, Bobby Roode, Nakamura in NXT, then personally, I think that Ray Phoenix would benefit from being in NXT for a little bit, you know, to get his like game up. Penta would benefit because he's botching like every match, etc., 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 cuckolds. Now, if you're gonna do this, you know, you can at least, if you're the WWE, not follow this predictable ass, you know what I mean, format where all we get to see are the new signings, right? Like every episode of Raw, you're going to see Penta now for the last 2 months. Every episode of SmackDown, you're going to see Phoenix, you know? And every episode of SmackDown recently, you're going to see JC Mateo. Like JC Mateo in a couple of weeks will have had more televised matches than Cody Rhodes has had since his return. At this rate, motherfuckers, in like 3 months, JC Mateo will have like more televised matches than Cody Rhodes, like since he was Stardust. You know, like, now, that's perfectly fine if JC Mateo were a good wrestler. But because he's boring as shit, you know what I mean? Nobody wants to see this. So maybe it's time for a nice revamping of the entire roster. Maybe it's time for like a mass hiring of other talented guys and gals, right? The way things are going, it's like there's like 19 developmental concepts. You know, you have NXT, and then all of a sudden, you have WWE LFG, which I stopped watching. That's why I stopped reviewing it, by the way. Shit was boring as fuck. You know, it's like, here's like a few people talking for 10 seconds. Then it's like 3 jobbers having like matches where the finisher is like a scoop slam. And then Mickey James and Booker T are like, that was a great match. Like, no, it wasn't. You know what I mean? Apparently that Jasper Troy, whatever his name is, I think it's Jasper Troy. It's definitely Jasper something. That guy won, and now he's attacking. I think he attacked like Obafemi. It's like, nobody cares about this feud. You know what I mean? And like, if you're good enough to debut in NXT, clearly you're good enough to be in WWE because people like Rey Fenix and Pentagon are not better than like Tony D'Angelo and you know, fucking, what's his face? Obafemi, right? Trick Williams has been in NXT for it's been like 5 years, motherfuckers. Like, clearly they don't have any intentions of this guy ever being a star, but like, at least let him go be a jobber on SmackDown. You know, he'll probably earn more money being a jobber on SmackDown than he will like being like a quasi-jobber on NXT. You know, now he's like in TNA, you know what I mean? Like, this guy's career is going in the wrong direction. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. The point is, cuckwads, that, you know, maybe it's time to just kind of like start fresh, you know? One of my favorite times in recent WWE history was when they did like NXT 2.0. Now, it ended up being a colossal failure because nobody there was pushed correctly, you know what I mean? But the amount of like interesting wrestlers they had when they started NXT 2.0 was awesome, you know? Like they debuted like 5-6 guys like immediately, you know? Tony D'Angelo, not that he's a great wrestler, he's probably a weak point, right? But him, they had like that, remember that Zion Quinn guy who should have been like a quasi-star? Well, nobody else remembers him either, cucks, so deal with it, you know? They had other people there as well, you know what I mean? They had like people that, in my opinion, by this time should have been megastars, you know? Like the Creed brothers. The Creed brothers are talented guys. They're legit in real life, you know? They're good at what they do, etc., you know what I mean? They had all these people debuting and, you know, giving us interesting things to watch, interesting things to react to. And what happened with that ultimately? Well, ultimately, they're all let the shit. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try it again. You know what I mean? Like, instead of giving people like Joe Gacy and Dexter Lumis infinite opportunities to do something, and instead of rehiring Bo Dallas, which fucking nobody asked for, how about hire people who are in their 20s right now and are killing it in the indies? Hire all of them. Now, you might be thinking, hater, how are they going to finance this? I'll tell you how, motherfucks. Fire Jasper Troy, fire everyone in Dark State, except for like Saquon Sugars or whatever. I forget his name. I think it's Saquon Sugars. I like him. Everybody else needs to go, you know? Fire like there's people, look, motherfucks, we have to be real here. There are people in NXT and WWE that are never going to make it. Now, if you are looking to hire people that are never going to make it, then that's fine, right? But there's a lot of people in the world that are never going to make it that might be more entertaining, right? This seems to be kind of why a lot of people are pissed off at R-Truth being released, for example, right? They're looking at this as like, well, look, hold on a second, you know, R-Truth, yeah, he was never going to make it. He was never going to grow into like a main eventer at this stage of his career at least, right? But at the very least, you know, if your options are have R-Truth or have fucking Rusev, you know, I'd rather have R-Truth. I agree, motherfucks. If the options are have Nakamura or R-Truth, I'd rather have R-Truth. They're both going to do 3 moves in the ring, but at least R-Truth looks better and is more presentable and can speak English so he can cut promos. You know, I understand that, right? But the problem is a lot of people still believe that Nakamura and Sami Zayn, like they have like some future prospect. You know, people look at Finn Balor. I saw an article. They're like, Finn Balor is aging out quickly, right? Do you think WWE will give him one final title run? Of course not, unless they're retarded, you know? But if your company is full of people that are not going to have an impact, then look for people and in volume that will have an impact, right? So for example, you can look at, I don't know, let's say you take like this brief period of NXT where they started hiring like a bunch of losers, and then also once in a while they'd get like a good guy here and there, right? So they got people like Andrade, who was a prospect. Andrade could have been something. They didn't make him into shit, right? He had zero character development, except for that brief time with Zelina Vega where he had the I suck, but now I'm going to be better moment, right? You had Drew McIntyre, who has had zero character development since he came back. He's just an asshole from Scotland. Like, that's his entire gimmick, Like, his gimmick is so bad that they have to tell us he has a new gimmick. They're like, oh, the Scottish psychopath. Oh, the Scottish Terminator. Oh, the Scottish Superman. Oh, well, shut the fuck up, you know what I mean? But in there, they had some good signings. People that also didn't make it, but in my opinion, should have. I'm talking your Bobby Roodes. I'm talking like, to a certain extent, right? Maybe like, fucking like some of the returns that happened, like Gallows and Anderson. I don't understand why they've returned so many times, and none of those times were they pushed to become like tag team champions for real, like multiple time tag team champions, They pretty much retired the Dudleys from the WWE. They beat them up. It's like that should have led to like a massive push, like massive dominance, But instead they have all these jobber-ass tag teams, So there are people that you're like, oh, these people should have done better, you know what I mean? They deserved better, and WWE should have handled them better. Like Bobby Roode is a great example. The returning Jinder Mahal is a great example. They had some success, but they should have had more success. Like Bobby Roode has like all the attributes to be a massive star. He's good looking, good on the mic, great physique, obviously. He's a good wrestler. He's experienced. You know what I mean? He fits the bill. He looks good in a suit, He's got all the attributes that are required, but they didn't do anything with him, And the reason why they didn't is because they focus on only a few stars. This new format focuses only on a few stars. But in my opinion, that there's still something that can be salvaged there. If you want to focus only on new stars, well, you can get rid of all the old people, right? And I don't mean old people like the R-Truths and the people that are aging out. Like, I mean, those people too, of course, they're not like anything special, but you have to like consider that these motherfucks, you know what I mean, are like not gonna achieve anything, right? And if you're being honest, you can just go to NXT right now and you can tell, like, all right, fine. If people believe that Obafemi is he's a future main eventer, like, I don't see it at all. But, if he is, you can keep him in, right? But why the fuck do you still have Karrion Kross? If you believe that Tony D'Angelo might be a WWE champion one day, like, personally, I don't see it at all, but some people do. That's fine. But why is Trick Williams still there? Clearly, he's not going to achieve anything. He's like, by at this rate, he's going to join the main roster at like 32. What the fuck's he going to do? You know what I mean? What are you going to just like Cody Rhodes him? They're not going to Cody Rhodes him. They're not. Right? So it's like, what's the point of him? And fine, he can be one of the ones that stays, but like you have Ty Dillinger there. Or whatever, Gavin Spear, whatever the fuck his name is. Ty Dillinger, motherfucker. That's how I know him. Like, you have that asshole in there with like a group of jobbers. It's like, just fire that entire group. Nobody will notice. Fire all of the Wyatt Six. Nobody will notice. Nor will they care. Save costs by firing people that are jobbers that get paid a lot and hiring like people for $70K who are gonna wrestle their ass off. Just do that. That might be more useful than their current landscape. And at the very least, this will provide us with fresh faces. Like, some of the most memorable times in wrestling for me as a fan have been like, remember that time in SmackDown where Teddy Long like took over like one of the times and he was like, yo, I'm gonna like revamp SmackDown, right? And SmackDown became kind of like the experimental show, right? Where they'd have like all these new ass wrestlers coming in all the time, right? Like Kofi Kingston and shit like that, you know what I mean? Boom, Kofi Kingston's there. Boom, and ECW did the same thing. Boom. What the fuck is this guy? His name is Sheamus. He's out there, just comes out like he's been there for 10 years wrestling Goldust, Like Jack Swagger. Like, some of these they're not all hits, motherfuckers. They're not all hits, but you had this like recursive and replenished roster. Nowadays, it's the same fucking roster. It's just like, and nobody moves up or down either. You know what I mean? You could look at, like, for example, like WWE 2K25 and look at the ratings of all the wrestlers and compare it to last year's, and there's like very little movement. It's basically like Jey Uso moved up, Gunther moved up, and then like people like AJ Styles are like plateauing in that mid-80s range, right? Because like he's not doing anything relevant, right? That's pretty much all that happens. Everyone else stays the fucking same. Nobody is like nobody jumps from like 70 on one year in SmackDown to like 95 in the next year. This used to happen back in the day. Like John Cena in his first game, he was like a 75. Next game, he's like an 84. Big ass jump, right? From jobber to like upper mid-carder, Batista, same thing. Like, you need that once in a while. I'm not saying do it all the time, but you need a moment, right? Like WrestleMania, like 18, like where things started falling apart a little bit. Up until WrestleMania 20, they kind of hinged on the same people that were working for them, right? Then at WrestleMania 21, things started to change. It was like a new era, right? All of a sudden, it's like John Cena, Batista, an emerging Randy Orton. Like, all these people were becoming stars, 3 new guys just became stars basically out of nowhere, right? Within like a year or two of their careers, they became massive stars. Now, these are 3 of the best ever, but, that's WWE's fault. Find 3 other best evers, Stop wasting your time with people that you're not going to push, right? Like, I like Trick Williams personally, right? I like Ilya Dragunov, but I'm not retarded. I recognize that these guys are never going to make it. Like, Ilya Dragunov is never going to be a WrestleMania main eventer. So it's like, if you don't have any intentions of making him a WrestleMania main eventer, then I suggest you round up everybody that is on what I call the Ilya Dragunov level, right? Like, what I mean by that is vanilla jobbers with zero gimmick. You find them all, and if you have like 5, you fire 4. If you have 10, you fire 9 or maybe 8, right? And so forth. You keep like 1 or 2 Ilya Dragunovs, 3 if everyone is an Ilya Dragunov and you need roster spots, right? So for example, is there a reason, motherfucks, why both Raul Mendoza and fucking Berto are in this company? Is there a reason why Joaquin Wilde and Berto or fucking Garza are in this company at the same time? Is there a reason why we have both Andrade and Santos Escobar? There is no reason for this. First of all, none of them wrestle, right? I mean, Andrade does, but Santos Escobar hasn't had a match on TV in like 1,000 years, right? Both of them have the same wrestling style. They have the same exact gimmick. They're just like these Hispanic wrestlers who think they're cool and wear suits and don't speak English. Well, Santos speaks English, I guess, right? And Andrade is better in the ring, so it's like, what do you do, right? But the point is, why do you need all of them? Do you really need, like, let's be real, do you really need, like, Montez Ford, fucking Trick Williams, Ilya Dragunov, like fucking Carmelo Hayes, Ludwig Kaiser, that's another one, motherfuckers. Do you really need all of these guys? Like, they do the same shit. They're just wrestlers with no gimmick. You do not need all of them, So compared to them, I get it. Like, it's like, why does Montez Ford have a job and R-Truth doesn't? Why does Gargano have a job and R-Truth doesn't? I get that. But this also speaks to how shitty everybody else is, because R-Truth also shouldn't have been kept around this long. He's been siphoning money out of this company for years, providing nothing in return. Now, a lot of people claim retroactively that he's this big entertaining wrestler, but I personally don't agree, you know what I mean? But that's a personal thing. People can disagree all they want. I get it, You're entertained by R-Truth, I'm not. It's a personal thing, I'm also not entertained by Rikishi, and a lot of people are, and I recognize that. I'm not stupid, But the point is, we need a roster revamp. There hasn't been one in a long time. You know what I mean? Like, arguably, I mean, I consider it a failure, but, you could consider a roster revamp when, like, The Shield debuted, right? Because you had these 3 guys who were all pegged to be, like, big deals, right? They came in as big deals with each other, and they were pegged as future individual big deals, right? Like, everybody knew Seth Rollins was going to get a push, right? Everybody knew Jon Moxley, who was then, of course, Dean Ambrose. Everybody knew who he was, kind of. Right, he's a big guy, like relatively speaking. He's like 6'4", he's not like the size of Tommaso Ciampa, and has some personality. So people are like, all right, like, we expect this guy to be like put in the category of people that are going to succeed, right? And of course Roman Reigns, you just look at him and you're like, this guy has like massive star power and massive presence, and like he's also Samoan, so that's gonna help him out. And you knew this guy was gonna be like the standout, right? But where are these people in the next generation? It's not fucking Trick Williams. Because if it were, he'd be on the main roster by now. What the fuck is Trick Williams waiting for? In kayfabe, what happens is eventually someone gets called up after being a jobber for so long, right? But it's like, why wouldn't SmackDown or Raw be interested in signing Trick Williams? Like, he beat Carmelo Hayes, and Carmelo Hayes was signed. But then again, Carmelo Hayes, is a jobber now, and everyone beats Carmelo Hayes. So, like, in comparison, Trick Williams' accomplishments seem very pedestrian. Like, all he's done is beat Carmelo Hayes. It's pretty much all the, like, think about that for a second, motherfuckers. He hasn't really had any success in NXT either. I mean, he's a main eventer in NXT and a champion, but like, all he did was beat Carmelo Hayes, and then he started losing, Then he started losing like other people who, quite frankly, are probably better than him, like Oba Femi and like Ethan Page. You know what I mean? So With all that being said, it's like, what? Ethan Page is another one, by the way. Like, do you really need both, like, Angelo Dawkins and Ethan Page? I don't think you do, motherfucks. But anyways, that's the idea here. Revamp the roster, hire a lot of new people, and fire the people that, quite frankly, aren't working out. Cucks this?